Okay, so let's start this second tutorial then. So what we're going to be looking at now, we've looked at the camera in the 3D space, and now what we're going to do is we're going to look at lighting, because not only can we add cameras to our 3D space in After Effects, but just like in the real world, we can also add lights. And lights can be really good fun. They can be quite hard to sort of get your head around though to begin with, so we're just going to start with a really basic composition, just to introduce you to the principle, and then, you know, like with real lighting, it's just about playing around with it really. So we're going to go to New Composition, like so, and we're going to go to 1920 by 1080. I don't know why that's set to 2.06, 30 frames per second, that'll be fine. I'm going to start off with a black background for now, and I'm going to click OK. So there's our composition, standard 1920 by 1080 HD composition. Okay, and I don't want this to be all that long actually. I probably should have adjusted the time in the thing, so I'm just going to take this to about 6 seconds. That should do. Okay, so here's our black background then. Is our workspace, and what we're first of all going to do is we're going to go and add a layer, new and solid, and we're going to make this, for now we're going to make this sort of like a grey kind of colour so we can see it nice and easily. Okay, so there's our grey solid, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click the 3D box like so, so that we can see it in 3 dimensions. And now what we're going to do is we're going to rotate it using the X axis. We're going to rotate it so that it becomes flat, 90 degrees, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab this Z handle. I'm going to pull this down so that it now drops down into a 3-dimensional space. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Layer, New, and we're going to add a camera, and we're going to go for 35mm camera. That looks fine. Because for now we just need the camera just to be in that position really. We're not going to do much with the camera in this one. So basically what's going to happen is we've got this is going to sort of work as the ground, and the reason why we need a 3D ground in this composition is because we're going to put objects on the ground, and by shining a light on them we can then create shadows. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do then, now that we've got our camera in place, drag that underneath, is we can now go to 2 views, so we can see here's our 3D space just like I've looked at before. There's our camera, here's our ground, there it is. So I'm going to open up grey solid and transform it, and I'm just going to scale it right up so that you can really, there you go, so it's a nice large workspace. Okay, cool. Now we're going to close that down. I'm going to right click on it and rename, and I'm going to call it floor. Am I going to add a white solid at this point? I think I will actually. So yeah, we perhaps could have started off with the white background rather than a black background, but no, not to worry. We're going to go to new and solid, and we're going to make a white background actually. I just think it'll be easier for us to see what we're doing if we have a white background. And I'm going to pull this behind the floor, and I'm also going to make this 3D as well, and I'm going to push that back into Z space like so, and I'm going to scale that up. So our white solid, open that up, open up our transform, scale that up so that it fills. There we go. So now we can sort of see as we move it around in our 3D space, we can see what's happening, can't we? There we go. Okay, and we're going to close that. We're going to call that, right click on it. Whoops, I double clicked and that's taken me into the layers panel. I didn't want to do that. If you ever find that's something that's happened, you can't see your composition anymore, what's probably happened is you've double clicked on a layer and it's taken you into the layers panel, which is where we do things like the clone stamp tool and things like that. Okay, so come back into here, right click on my white solid, rename, and I'm going to call that wall. So far so good. Right then, now what we're going to do is we're going to import some assets. Now normally, as you know, I've been trying to do all these After Effects tutorials without any kind of third-party bits and pieces. These aren't plugins, of course, these are just assets from Video Copilot. Okay, and I'm going to just grab a few of these. So I'm going to grab number 3, I think number 7's pretty good, and number 9. So I'm going to grab those 3. And I'm going to drag them into my project. In fact, I might not have sent you all of those. I might just give you these 3. Okay, but I might do. They are actually on the drives and shares on the computers in TC104 in the James Dolby folder. Anyway, so here we go. So what we're going to do then is we're going to take our drop. So here's drop number 9, for example. And I'm going to pull this down and I'm going to put it above the floor. And if we play it through, what you'll find is that it's basically an asset of some water and an ink drop which has been dropped into the water to create this kind of lovely evolving explosion kind of look. You know, this sort of, not explosion, but you know what I mean, this sort of exploding ink drop kind of evolving asset. Okay, and as you can see, it's very pretty. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this as our subject. We're going to shine a light on it to create shadows. So what we're going to do is I'm going to keep it there. I'm going to make it a 3-dimensional object so we can see it in our 3D space. I'm going to move it back a little bit just into our space. I might move it over to the side slightly, like so. And I'm just going to push it down just to make sure that it's, there we go, that's the point at which it's in the floor. There we go, so you can see there. Okay, I might just move it back a little bit more. Right then, what we're now going to do is we're going to come up to Layer, and we're going to go to New and Light. And to begin with, we're just going to start with a white point light. Okay, and we're going to make sure that Cast Shadows is selected. We can go and change that later on if we forget to check that. But yeah, make sure that's checked. I'm going to put it there. And now, here's our light. Okay, what's happening is it's shining a light on the scene, and so you can see that our light grey floor has now become dark because we're shining a light on it, and so the areas that aren't lit are now darker. Okay, so what happens then is, just like a normal light, if we grab this, so I zoom in slightly so you can see what I'm doing. So here's our camera. Remember, holding down spacebar to move around this scene. There's our camera looking at our asset. So that's what we're seeing, and here's our light. So you can't see the light, like it's not like it's a light where you'll be involved in your shot. It just creates a light source. And if I move it this way and then I pick it up and drag it back into the Z space, as it goes behind our image, you can see what's happening. There's a light source now behind this dark image, and because there's no light shining on it, yet now you can't see our evolving texture any longer. Okay. Now, the reason I want to do this before we start playing with this texture is because I want to show you what's going on. So if I zoom out slightly, if we come on to drop 9 and open that up, and we open up our material options, what we want to do is we want to turn on Casts Shadows. And what's happening now, as you can see, is that this light in our 3D scene, there's our light, look, shining all around, and it's creating this shadow from this scene, and we can see that shadow because it's on the near side of the camera. So if I was to move this around now, you can see that the light, if I pick up my light and I move my light around, you should be able to see that the shadow changes as the light moves, just like a normal light would. Yeah, because this is a 3D object, it's now casting shadows in just the same way as any normal 3D object would. Okay, so what we're going to try and do then is we want to be able to see our asset. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Layer and New, and I'm going to go to New Light. And this light is actually going to be the one that shines on our asset to illuminate it. So now as we play it, we should be able to see it again. There we go, because it's now, we can see it now because it's being illuminated by our second light. And you can see what's happening here is that our second light is now casting a shadow which is going across the floor and up the wall. And if we don't want that, that's perfectly easy to get rid of, just unlike a normal light, which are it's harder to get rid of. You can open up Point Light 2, open up Light Options, and you can just say, do I want this to cast shadows? Turn that off, and now no shadows. So now you get all the properties of illumination of a lovely point light, but without the shadows that we might not want. So, but the problem of course is that we've got our light in the background, and that light in the background is shining on a big square rectangular object with our asset in. That's not what we want, is it? So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we can see our asset. I'm going to highlight our drop 9, and I'm going to go into Effect. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Channel, and I'm going to invert it. Just because it's easier to key out when it's white, a white background and black. It's just harder to get a really nice refined edge when it's the other way around. So I'm going to invert it first of all, and that's one of the reasons why I've also chosen to have this white background now, is because you can see the asset in front of the white background more easily. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our drop 9 control. So there's our invert effect. Okay, and what we're now going to do is we're going to go into effect and keying and color range. So unlike when we did the 3D camera track where we used extract, we're actually going to use the color range here, and we're going to click on the white, and that's going to take out most of that white, but we've still got a bit of a chewy kind of edge to our asset because it's very fine and very delicate. So that's not a particularly good way of, well, it is good. It's taken out most of that white, but it's still left us with quite a lot. Now we could start by adding more of these so we can pick up some greys and that sort of thing, but again it just becomes really chewy and sort of not really what we want. Okay, so I'm going to undo that, he says. There we go, that's better. Take that back to where it was. I don't know why my computer's not playing ball today. There we go. Right, take it back to where it was. So we're going to key out that white. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go up to effect and keying and key cleaner, and we're just going to increase the radius of our key so that it just softens that up a little bit. Okay. Now hopefully you can already start to see what's happening here is that our point light that we created earlier is now creating these shadows from our asset. So if we now move our asset back and we play it through, so I play head back, we play the asset through, then you can see it sort of launching itself and it's creating these lovely shadows. Yeah. Now I think with a bit of refinement I could get rid of some of these grey ghosting effects, but you get the idea. I mean, this is what I was trying to sort of do with this tutorial, just to give you a sense of what happens when you add these lights. Okay, so you can do all sorts of other things. I mean, you can come back to your light, for example. Let's get it to it's a nice point here. Here's our point light, so we can open that up and we can open up light options, for example, and we could change it to being a spotlight, for example, and this is quite a good way of sort of seeing what's going on. So you can see what's happening over here now in the 3D space. Now that we've changed our light to a spot, this is the cone of light that is being produced. So what I can do is I can change my cone angle, so I can draw it down like so. So can you see what's happening here? This is the cone of light that's being produced, and I can sort of tighten that up, or I can soften it, and I can take the cone feather completely off, so it's a nice hard edge if I want it, or I can feather it right out. And of course, not only can I change that to a spotlight, but I can then transform it, so I can go, I can rotate it up and down just like a normal object. I can rotate it from side to side, so I can like literally pick out the asset that I want if I want to do that, that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm going to just reset that back to where it was. Take that back to a spot, that point light, sorry, like so. And because I've reset it now, obviously it's in front of our asset, so I'm just going to drag this back into the Z space again, so that it's now casting those lovely shadows, which is what we want. Okay, so this is the sort of the way we can start to generate this sort of composition. Okay, so I might just go back into here and pick up number 3 and bring that down over the top like so. So I'm going to do the same thing. So with number 3 highlighted, I'm going to go to Effect, Channel, and Invert like so. So this is a nice clean key, so I might put this one at the beginning. It's a nice shape, this one. And I'm going to go to Keying and Color Range, so into my Effect controls, and get rid of the white. So you can just see there's some chewy edges to this. So then I'm going to go to Effect and Keying, Key Cleaner, and just up that a little bit, just to soften that down. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to make that a 3D object again. Bring it forward a little bit, maybe bring it down into the. It's probably a bit too close actually. So pull that back like so. I'm going to go to point drop number 9 and bring that back a bit further. Okay, and then number 3. Push that back a bit further again, just make sure that's still in the ground. Yes, it is. There we go. So again, all we need to do is open up the drop on point 3, material options, and cast shadows. Yep. Okay, and there we go. We've got our shadow again. So now if we play this through, you can see they should both launch at the same time with these nice developing shadow effects. And just as a thing if you want to start using these kinds of assets. Of course, a nice thing to do with like number 3 is I'm going to go to Effect, and I'm going to go to Color Correction and Curves, and I can just give this a nice curves adjustment. So I can go to blue and push up the blue, for example, like that, and I might go to green, whack up some, so it makes it nice and turquoisey or whatever, that sort of thing. Yeah, so you can do those sorts of things as well to really really make it look interesting. Again, I might do a bit more sort of mucking about with this grey ghosting effect, but anyway, you can fettle that. So anyway, there we are. So that's the sort of thing that you can produce. Now, our final thing is, obviously we've got this situation here where we've got these two assets growing against this grey background. But of course, the nice thing about the way we can work with lights in After Effects is if we don't want this grey floor, we can literally just go into Floor, open up the material options like so, and then you can just say accepts lights, no, and then I'll just turn that off. Yeah, accepts shadows, no, so then there's no shadows at all. So then now we've got ourselves a situation where if we did the same thing with the wall, for example, we could do the same thing there. So obviously we've got this sort of vignetting or whatever. Where are we? So we can play around with those settings to there we go. Accept lights off, on, shadows only, that sort of thing. So now we can get ourselves in this nice white environment, where we've just got our assets in this sort of white studio kind of thing, if you like. So we could do the same thing with wall, for example. So we open up the material options, and we go accepts shadows only and off. There we go. So now the lights don't affect anything except our assets. So the lights aren't affecting our white solids, background and wall. So now we've just got ourselves a nice white space with these shadows on. Okay. So that's sort of a very brief introduction to lighting in the 3D space. As I say, I think the thing you've got to try and sort of think about with lighting in After Effects is just doing it exactly the same way as you would with lighting in the real world. I would encourage you always to take lights out when you've got some spare time and just play with them, because it's the best way to learn how to use lighting. Lighting is kind of like painting, as I've said before. It's an interesting one. You wouldn't just do like one painting and assume that you know how to paint. You know what I mean? You would continue painting, you continue practicing, you continue trying it out. It's exactly the same with lighting, and to an extent, it's exactly the same with lighting in After Effects as well. Just play with it, try out the different options, try it with put yourself in there. Do a green screen of yourself. See how it works when you're lighting yourself, that sort of thing, and just sort of start to see how the lights in After Effects can affect that 3D space. Okay, nice one. Right, I shall see you in the final tutorial.